as we go into this conversation, you've probably been as active, Bank Street and your leadership there, on the mergers and acquisitions that capture the meaning of convergence. Define for everyone here how you look at convergence between the wireline and wireless markets, and is it similar to when we saw local and long distance converge in the beginning of 2000 and become one market? Talk a little bit about the meaning of convergence.
You know, convergence is a topic that began really in the mid-90s as a concept, and it had many aspects to it. One aspect was eliminating distance as a concept.
Yeah.
One aspect was recognizing that data needed to traverse all types of technology and paradigms. You know, today we increasingly talk about the convergence between a mobile wireless consumer and wireline. Some of that is driven by the continuing trend as varieties of technologies and applications and ways in which we do things demand a further integration among these platforms. Yeah. There's also another reality, which is spectrum is very expensive, and the use cases for bandwidth, you know, using the example of a home, is so dramatic that it is extremely valuable to have an alternative bandwidth solution that doesn't consume spectrum capacity in that regard. And some natural economics drive the thinking as to those things becoming much more symbiotic at the digital infrastructure layer. And we've seen a fair amount of activity in that sphere. Another aspect of it is competitive. So the success that cable has had in introducing mobility into their product suite increasingly forces or pushes the hand of every other player to have product parity, recognizing these traffic patterns that the consumers increasingly will have. And you know, as we have all seen, the trend lines for utilization of communications infrastructure over the course of the day now exceeds the hours we sleep, is a pretty extraordinary change from our childhood.
Yeah. So I want to step back a little bit. Google Fiber is one of our member companies, and then after Google Fiber entered the marketplace, trying to be a catalyst for new competition to cable and telco interest around the country. And then after that entry, we've had, you know, an explosion of new competitive fiber to the home companies, many funded by private equity, some coming out of existing companies like C-Spire, or what Bluebird is doing, what Summit is doing, Sonic out on the West Coast. I mean, there's example after example of competitive fiber that over the last 10 years has really injected new investment, new deployment, and driven now what is being done by incumbent and competitor alike, deploying fiber. And then over the last 2 or 3 years, you've had T-Mobile acquire MetroNet, you've had AT&T acquiring the residential Lumen, you've had Verizon acquiring Frontier. Talk to us a little bit. What is all those mergers and acquisitions, and as the telcos and the competitive fiber and the wireless begin to possibly form one market, a consumer broadband market, that the distinction between wireless and wired, does that go away? Is it seamless?
The aspiration is for it to become more seamless. And it's already happening. I mean, we all probably don't realize it, but we walk into our home or office and our cell phones are now tethered to our Wi-Fi, not to a cell site in many cases. These kinds of handoffs will become much more natural. The devices are getting smarter and more capable. The silliness of having multiple phones will be managed by software and SIM cards, not multiple devices. There'll be increasing demands for that integration, that convergence that you referenced earlier. You also mentioned a variety of names that are quite different than one another in some respects. I mean, we all lived through the introduction of commercial fiber competition in the early 90s and accelerated over the mid-90s. That phenomenon was a byproduct of an economic opportunity that was enabled, one, by technology, unit economics and cost to deploy a commercial customer created a viable proposition for an insurgent to come and take market share against, in many cases, very lofty priced alternative offerings. The regulatory environment became supportive of that, and the evangelizing to the investment community became thematically one of the biggest market opportunities for competitive communications investing of that decade.
Yeah.
In some respects, over the last decade, the same has been happening in the consumer side. I remember folks, even in the 90s, talking about introducing consumer fiber competition. And some of those people were thought of as heretics. And even long before there was a Google Fiber, there were some families that were those heretics that started these companies. And some have created very strong moats around their geographies and created wonderful businesses that will likewise be generational in their format. Once the theme was understood and the economics were proven through the execution layer, I think then it became a bit of a race, just like it did in the commercial market, to seize as much of that market opportunity as possible. And in the early part of the race, it's a bit of speaking for addressable market that no one is attacking with a broadband fiber solution. And so you saw all of these business plans, all these entrepreneurs, folks also that were already in the business looking to expand their sphere of opportunity into leverageable near market opportunities. Some actually had spreadsheets of requirements that defined market opportunity for them and went after those geographies regardless of whether they were close or not, as the case may be, because they had an excellence in execution model. As we're now approaching that place where there aren't that many unspoken for markets, you now have a new reality, which is folks are now looking at their business cases and saying, for us to keep our revenue, cash flow growth, and get the incremental return on capital, we need to start thinking about further galvanizing our markets through synergies and combinations, in other cases, accelerating the desire to be strategically relevant, therefore acquiring smaller players to create a geography that is important, and important sometimes also means sizable, such that you can participate in the further amalgamations in the marketplace. And it's a long-winded way of saying that there are a number of different motivators that are pushing people to do different things. But the long and short of it is that most of it is about addressing that consumer demand set on the fastest basis with the most effective execution, which means you need scale economies and other things to your benefit as well.
So talk about real case examples. T-Mobile, Metronet, T-Mobile, Lumos, the strategic partnerships of how to build as fast as possible, leveraging the scale and the scope of a national wireless company. AT&T has followed a model of both acquisition and out-of-region build with Gigapower. Verizon seems to be following some of both AT&T and T-Mobile strategy on strategic partnerships of building the fiber while the retail customer goes to the national wireless. So how does that all end up? 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, do the national wireless carriers combine with our telco residential, partner strategically with cable and with competitive fiber, and what does the market look like?
I think over the next number of years, you'll see a little bit of all of that.
Yeah.
There is no homogeneous answer. I think T-Mobile undoubtedly saw the success that Verizon and AT&T were having in the ability to leverage their quality brands across a variety of product lines, and the ability to also integrate broadband in a way that you could actually allow your spectrum efficiency to work out on a much more programmed basis. The overall quality and experience and stickiness that comes from a customer relationship with a brand also turns out to be a churn mitigator, which is a big variable for all of the wireless players. So T-Mobile had a bit of a purist view too. They didn't want to have legacy copper or other entanglements that some of the others had. So they set in motion to acquire a capability. And we were fortunate to architect both the Lumos deal and later the Metronet transaction, and then subsequently sold a number of other companies to those platforms. And it's T-Mobile's way maybe of assembling a capability, and the separation of the customer from the network company is also just a specialization of skills, so that you can allow the network company to build and add, I'll call them viable customer passing opportunities, so that the marketing company can come in and sell those customers as rapidly as possible. That specialization is working quite well. I think both of those platforms are doing very well. And I think given even with the success that they've had in that sphere, how far behind T-Mo is in the overall consumer broadband space, we suspect we'll see more out of T-Mobile over the years to come. Likewise, I think I would also say that a lot of folks are pivoting their attention back to commercial fiber as a topic of interest, as a lot of fury has developed in the fiber to the prem thesis. People are realizing that fiber to the prem actually means fiber to everything. And when you're going by communities and high rises and MDUs, as the case may be, you're also passing office parks and other venues that...
And data centers.
And data centers and inference facilities, and as the fellow from Verizon said, repurposed old central offices that become the new edge facilities, perhaps for the next generation. So there's a ton of innovation happening, but oftentimes with a lot of this commentary about these new capabilities, people have forgotten that attached to all of these capabilities is a broadband infrastructure requirement that is growing alongside it.
So just to wrap up this part of our conversation, 3-5 years from now, is there one consumer broadband market, or is it still is there still diversity, and that the wireless, wired consolidation and convergence at the end of 5 years, does that some combination or some wired and MVNO or wired and wireless combination, is that the market 3 to 5 years from now?
I think it will be the vast majority of the market. I often remind people that even with the proliferation of various modern techniques, that there are still hundreds of family telcos, co-ops, varieties of rural cable companies, and not so rural market operators as well, that aren't playing into any of these themes. They are simply providing a reliable, trustworthy service and allowing the customer in some cases to make buying decisions a la carte. To what degree they integrate those over time will largely be dictated by customers. I mean, I think some operators are resisting the convergence theme. Some operators are not with the luxury and the balance sheet capable of introducing the full menu of services that customers even may want. And you should see around those kind of companies further strategic activity to come.
All right, so let's go to another market. We have in our membership a lot of traditional CLECs, cloud, managed services, IT services. What do you see in that sector as AI enters, agentic AI, the possibility of bundling and combining all the different things that are going to be coming into the marketplace? So if you were buying stock or buying a company that combines, the wholesale access and resale of networks, and then the combination of whether it's Microsoft Teams or agents or any of the other types of AI bundling, what would you recommend?
Well, I don't know that I'd recommend anything. I think different customers will choose different things. But I would say, many folks know us for the headline-making sort of digital infrastructure type transactions, but we also have a very large emphasis on IT, hybrid IT, what we broadly refer to as managed services, where we see the convergence of all of these, I'll call them technologies, that oftentimes ride on and leverage the digital infrastructure that's being deployed. With the escalation of available broadband on an integrated basis, crossing all devices, I think it is a robust time technologically for people to sort of reinvent offerings. And I think about in my daily life, when someone calls me at my phone number, it reaches 6 different places. And the types of applications that used to be tethered to your desktop are now easily available on every one of your mobile devices, whether it's a laptop or a phone or whatever have you. There's increasing number of applications that are going to also become interactive propositions with regard to CRM tools and things of the sort, where you walk into a bank and the entire organization is now aware of your presence and knows who you should be talking to based on their priority schema. Those kinds of things are upon us. They're happening as we speak. And the folks that enable those capabilities and varieties of tools. In some cases, it's logistics management. In other cases, it's fleet management. In other cases, it's data gathering as it relates to the productivity measures of different kinds of activities. And all of these are becoming tools that are further and further enabled by what the devices can do technologically and how we can harvest the information from all of that. There's a lot of exciting things that come with that. There's also some perhaps dangers and care that we need to take about how much of our corporate or institutional engagement exposes us as well. And so there's a fair amount of thinking on that side as well. On the transaction side, I think that translates to a lot of folks integrating capabilities. I think on the transaction side, I also see cross-pollinating skills as folks have these important brands. I think you'll see them looking to stretch those brands in ways that people may not have thought about before. A few weeks back, I think you saw perhaps one of the big mobile brands acquire a digital venue business at sporting venues, and as a way to sort of extend their brand into places where they have deployed DAS and other wireless technologies, but bringing those digital resources together to actually further propagate another revenue stream is something that some of the more innovative and robust players are going to continue to look for.
And so not too long ago, a few weeks ago, we had something that we might not have predicted a year ago, and that is SpaceX Starlink acquires EchoStar's mobile spectrum. What does that mean? And what do you think Starlink, SpaceX, as they try to converge satellite to mobile or combine the two, what does that network look like? What role does it play in the marketplace? What offerings do they do? Would it be a fourth competitor, or would it simply be a complementary capacity network as the demand grows for the traditional carriers? What does that acquisition mean for the market?
Well, the acquisition was a byproduct of basically Charlie having run out of time. And he was endeavoring with his colleagues to build a consequential, I'll call it new approach to mobile wireless. And unfortunately didn't have the right balance sheet characteristics to do that. And I think the FCC gave him a limited amount of time to find a home for his assets, and he was successful in doing that. Starlink is a fascinating product in the sense that it has become a complement in a lot of geographies, and has, with spectrum assets, potentially the opportunity to think about how to become a rival network in certain geography. But I don't think, I'm not going to profess to reading Elon's mind or any of his colleagues for that matter, but I don't think they're looking to become a commodity rival. I think they're looking to become an enabler of machine communications, an enabler of I'll call it roaming processing, as the case may be. There's next-gen capabilities that are at the forefront of how they're thinking about their platform, and as they proliferate, launching another satellite every week. I think they're looking for unit economics that perhaps can make them a substitute for broadband in some rural markets, because they become very economically a good option, maybe rivaling some of the I'll call it point-to-multipoint wireless options as well. So I think they have some areas where they can go unrivaled or relatively lightly rivaled, and defining new areas where not many people are there yet. And I think those will afford some interesting opportunity sets for them. But likewise, I wouldn't count out the mobile wireless folks, who are all also developing their own R&D capabilities to think about how to integrate commercial activity, large venues, introduce technology into the management of large venues, and wide varieties of other things that are to come as well. And they'll have some natural advantages there, where a space solution just has no place at all.
Going to another sector that a lot of our member companies do, so fiber connectivity to the hyperscale data center or to the neo data centers. High growth, high potential. What's going to happen in that sector next 3 to 5 years?
Well, there's an enormous amount of deployment that's happening in the data center sphere in support of a lot of promising technologies to come. And oftentimes people focus on the necessary power and data center capacity, and sometimes forget that there's an extension of core digital infrastructure that is the connectivity layer as well, without which these things wouldn't have terribly much value. So there is a massive step function demand set in that ecosystem. What is done and how things are going to continue to be done in the, let's call it cloud AI sphere of activities, will determine how core those communications paths will become relative to other prior distributed communications. But I think the players in the category also have to be a little mindful of what happened in the subsea space, for example, where you've enabled some of the giants to come in with wholesale use cases. And I remember back in the day going to PTC, where the biggest market participants at the conference were all minutes trafficking and trading players. Not so much anymore, because they afforded network capabilities that now give away those minutes for free. And so these competitive alignments and misalignments are going to be a big part of thinking about success in the comms and convergence arena for years from now to come.
So as we wrap up, right now we're in a build period. Will we soon be in a bubble? Will we boom and bust? Or is the demand and the technology different and the market different, so it is a sustainable build and growth period? I saved the easiest question.
Yeah, of course. I would say there's a lot of noise in the air that makes it difficult for people to contextualize what's afoot.
Yeah.
I think there's a national imperative that has been determined by our elected leaders to not fall behind in the AI race. And as such, it has forced all of the levers to accelerate to make sure that we have appropriate inventory of power, connectivity, processing capabilities, so on and so on. And the speed with which that is being executed has created a tremendous amount of economic activity. With these announcements, it's not just bricks and mortar, it's jobs, it's technology production, it's manufacturing, it's integrators, it's software developers, it's every variety of thing.
Once the core infrastructure of data centers and fiber and energy, then there's going to be, hopefully, next generation advanced manufacturing, advanced applications, and so
all of those things are true. The question is timing. And I'm only sure of one thing, which is we will not get timing right, nor will the adoption be a straight line as people think. But as was true in the last 35 years, I think many of the promises of the early to mid 90s not only became reality, but became reality better than anybody expected. Yeah. Just on a different timeline. We went through, a number of cycles along that path, but the path was still net in the direction of what was expected. I suspect the same will be true in this whole AI generation. But in the meantime, there's an abundance of corporate activity, innovation, technology work. I was listening to Andrew Power at a conference here, actually in DC, a couple months back, and he said, while we're pursuing the AI promise, there's an enormous amount of vibrant corporate activities and institutional grade work that's going on. And from a capital markets perspective, what that affords is very high quality cash flows on the back of which a lot of this AI fever is, and the fever is really this accelerated market grabbing opportunity. That is being done largely on the promise and creditworthiness of investment grade companies that have committed to it, unlike the 90s where it was really built on the back of a promise and not much else. And so I do like to distinguish those two variables as being quite different than what we had back then.
Does that mean you're predicting sustainable growth and that we'll avoid the boom and the bust and the bubble of the early 2000s, or that it could be an accelerated growth curve, but some peaks and valleys along the way?
To assume that every subsegment will be homogeneous. I think there will be some subsegments that will grow at a measured pace with less peaks and valleys. There will be some areas that will have much bumpier paths because the step functions of what they're doing is much chunkier, and therefore think about real estate, for example, which is what a data center largely is. You build a massive capacity, the use cases may not come exactly as planned on time when expected. So the chunkiness of those moves may create a little bit of peaks and valleys that are a little different. On the connectivity side, however, it does feel like a time where everything is increasingly going to be interconnected, and as a result, the bandwidth requirements, not just for the human consumption layer, but for the machine-to-machine layer, is just soon to be upon us. Yeah. And when computers and devices and our every appliance and every item we have in our lives are interconnected, that's a time when the AI layer starts to optimize for us, but that is an enormous amount of new communications activity that we've never assessed before.
So not to put words in your mouth, but buy connectivity, hold connectivity, and it's going to be good.
Over the course of another generation, there's no doubt that these are going to continue to be robust categories. I don't know that I'm in the business of making broad schematics of buy, hold, and sell positions.
As much as I try to push you.
Yes, but I would say that it will remain an investable category with great interest for quite some time to come.
Well, Rich, I really appreciate you having the conversation with me, as your insight, your wisdom, and your experience in this sector, but also your support for INCOMPAS. You've been a great friend to INCOMPAS. I look forward to the dinners you sponsor and host every year. It's good to see you, and I wish you the very best in all the deals that you lead and do.
Thank you. That's very kind.